I'll tell it straight because that's how I've always operated. I'm Elon Musk, and I've spent my life building things from the edge of failure, sleeping on factory floors, betting everything on ideas people said were impossible, and now I find myself at the center of another familiar storm as Bernie Sanders revives the wealth tax debate and pulls my name into it. Not because I asked for it, but because I've become a symbol in a broader argument about billionaires, technology, inequality, and what AI is about to do to the global economy. And I want people to understand how this looks from my side, because the story often gets flattened into slogans, sound bites, and villains. When reality is far more complex, I didn't wake up one day and decide to hoard wealth for fun. Most of my net worth is theoretical, locked in companies that employ tens of thousands of people and build electric cars, rockets, satellites, brain interfaces, and AI systems meant to extend human capability. And when Bernie says billionaires shouldn't exist, what he's really questioning is whether society should allow individuals to take enormous risks and, if they succeed, retain outsized rewards because those rewards are what fund the next impossible project. SpaceX nearly died multiple times, Tesla nearly collapsed, and there were years when the probability of total failure was overwhelming. No government stepped in then to absorb the risk. And now that these efforts have paid off, the conversation shifts to redistribution without fully accounting for the fragility of innovation ecosystems. I understand the anger. I really do. Inequality is real, and technology amplifies it faster than our institutions can adapt. But a wealth tax isn't a magic fix. It's a blunt instrument applied to a highly dynamic system. You tax unrealized gains and you force founders to sell ownership. You weaken long-term control. You invite short-term thinking. And you risk pushing capital and innovation elsewhere. And when AI enters the picture, the stakes get even higher. Because we are on the verge of automating vast portions of cognitive labor, which means productivity will explode while traditional jobs disappear or transform. And the real question isn't how much to tax people like me. It's how to redesign economic structures so abundance doesn't coexist with desperation. I've said before that universal basic income may be necessary, not because it sounds good politically, but because the math points there when machines outperform humans at scale, and that requires sustainable funding models, not punitive policies driven by resentment. Bernie and I actually agree on more than people think. The system is outdated, incentives are misaligned, and unchecked corporate power can be dangerous. But where we diverge is in how change happens. I believe progress comes from building, iterating, and scaling solutions, not from framing success itself as a moral failure. If you want cleaner energy, interplanetary survival, resilient communication networks, and safe AI, you need people willing to dedicate their lives to those outcomes. And yes, they'll become wealthy if they succeed, but that wealth is a byproduct, not the goal. And when I hear chants to tax Elon, I don't hear a serious plan for the AI-driven future. I hear a familiar human impulse to simplify complex problems by assigning a face to them. And I'm willing to debate Bernie or anyone else on policy details, data, and long-term consequences because this moment matters. How we respond to technological acceleration will define whether the future is broadly prosperous or deeply divided, and I'd rather be part of an honest, uncomfortable conversation than a convenient villain in a political narrative. Because the debate didn't stop with a tweet or headline, escalated into a broader cultural referendum on who deserves what in an age where machines think, code, and create faster than any human ever could. And when Bernie Sanders talks about taxing extreme wealth, he's really voicing a fear shared by millions that the future is slipping out of their control, that technology is racing ahead while wages stagnate and institutions lag behind. And I don't dismiss that fear. I take it seriously because I help build the very tools accelerating that change. But what frustrates me is the assumption that wealth concentration is the root cause rather than a symptom of exponential technology colliding with linear governance. AI doesn't care about tax brackets, it doesn't vote, it doesn't negotiate with labor unions. It simply optimizes, and if we don't understand that, we'll keep applying 20th century solutions to 21st century problems. When I look at my balance sheet, I don't see yachts and gold vaults. I see factories, server farms, R&D pipelines, payrolls, launch pads, risk stacked on top of risk, and yes, massive upside if it all works. But that upside fuels the next iteration, and that's what people miss when they imagine wealth as static, like a dragon sitting on a pile of coins. In reality, it's kinetic, constantly reinvested, constantly vulnerable to failure. And when policymakers talk about wealth taxes without grappling with liquidity, volatility, and capital flight, they're playing with forces they don't fully model. I've watched talented engineers leave countries not because they hate paying taxes, but because uncertainty kills momentum. And momentum is everything in deep tech, especially AI, where falling behind by a year can mean irrelevance. The irony is that the same people calling for aggressive wealth taxes also demand rapid progress on climate change, space exploration, and AI safety, all of which require enormous upfront capital and long-term horizons. You can't have moonshots without people willing to bet their entire net worth on them. And I know Bernie believes government should fill that role, but history shows bureaucracies move slower than innovation curves, and when they fail, there's no personal accountability. Whereas when I fail, it's my reputation, my companies, my capital on the line, and that pressure creates urgency. Now, on the AI front specifically, I think this is where the debate needs to mature. Because AI will generate unprecedented wealth with minimal human labor, which means taxing individuals won't be enough. You need to think about taxing outputs, value creation, and maybe even compute itself, while redistributing access to the benefits, education, healthcare, and a baseline income. And I've said openly that AI could be humanity's best or worst invention, which is why concentration of power, whether corporate or governmental, should worry everyone. Including Bernie, the solution isn't to tear down builders, it's to design systems where builders and society advance together. And I'm not pretending I have all the answers, I don't. But I do know that vilifying entrepreneurs won't stop automation, won't reverse globalization, and won't make AI less powerful. It will just slow progress in places that still believe in taking risks. And when history looks back on this era, the question won't be how many billionaires we taxed. It will be whether we had the courage to rethink economic rules entirely. And I'm ready for that conversation, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it puts me in the crosshairs, because the future doesn't wait for political consensus. It arrives whether we're ready or not. Once the cameras turn off and the tweets stop trending, the real consequences of this debate start to surface. And I think about them constantly. not as an abstract billionaire, but as someone who wakes up every day thinking about timelines, bottlenecks, and existential risk, because while politicians argue over redistribution, the underlying technological curve keeps bending upward, indifferent to ideology, and that's the part that keeps me up at night. Bernie's wealth tax proposal isn't just about money, it's about control, about who gets to decide how the future is built. And I worry that we're mistaking moral certainty for technical understanding, because the systems we're discussing are non-linear, fragile, and extremely sensitive to incentives. If you disincentivize long-term ownership, you fragment vision, and when vision fragments, projects that require decades of commitment, like Mars colonization, global EV infrastructure, or safe artificial general intelligence, simply don't happen. They die in committee or get optimized into mediocrity. And I've seen this firsthand. I've dealt with regulators who don't understand the technology they regulate, who reduce complex engineering problems into checkbox compliance, and now imagine giving those same structures more control over capital allocation at the exact moment when AI is rewriting the rules of productivity. That's not compassion, that's risk. And yet, I don't want this to sound like a defense of inequality for its own sake, because inequality at the scale we're seeing is destabilizing socially and politically, and ignoring that would be reckless. But the answer isn't to punish the visible winners of a system while leaving the system itself intact. The answer is to redesign ownership, participation, and value distribution from the ground up. When ASC can generate software, art, research, and strategy at near zero marginal cost, labor as we understand it changes forever. And if income is still primarily tied to jobs, we're going to see mass displacement no tax policy can patch over. That's why I keep coming back to first principles. What does a post-scarcity or near post-scarcity economy look like? How do humans find meaning when survival is no longer the primary constraint? And how do we fund that transition without collapsing innovation? Taxing wealth feels emotionally satisfying, but it's structurally shallow. It treats the symptom, not the cause.